Hello viewers, and welcome to episode 29 of F1 Talk, and in this edition, as expected, I will be going over my thoughts, reviews, and of course the race results of the German Grand Prix that took place at Hockenheim yesterday. So, I will be starting off with the only bit of news that came before the Grand Prix. Was something that I didn't actually know before I did the last video. It was that the McLarens had significant amounts of upgrades to the car, and you could quite clearly see that the upgrades made a difference, but I'll come back to that a little bit later on. So with the start, it was a very good start from Fernando Alonso, but not a particularly good one from Sebastian Vettel. Pretty slow start from the double reigning champion, and almost had Michael Schumacher pass him on the first couple of corners, and would have made for a very difficult race had the older German managed to pass the younger German. But very good first lap action between the two of them. Meanwhile, Alonso was streaking off into the lead, a la Vettel of the past couple of seasons. Now, Felipe Massa, hit in contrast, had a pretty bad race to Fernando, and he had some contact with another car. It looked to be a Toro Rosso that hit him, but on looking at the replays, and do bear in mind that I was only able to see the highlight package that the BBC have to offer, I thought it was a white car that hit him, or a car with a bit of white in it. So could have either been a Force India, a Williams, or a Sauber. If anyone out there watching this knows exactly what happened to Felipe, please drop us a comment in the comment box, because I couldn't tell who hit him, but someone definitely did. It was he lost his front wing. He had to come into the pits, and basically that was his race compromised from there on. And speaking of race compromises, Lewis Hamilton had a flat tyre on lap 3 that basically cost him any points, or at least a decent points finish. Like I say, the McLarens were definitely back on the pace in this particular Grand Prix, and it was frustrating for Lewis because he couldn't use that pace to its full potential. Nico Hülkenberg was in 4th or 5th place at a certain point very early on, and you could quite clearly see that he was holding up Jenson Button, Nico Rosberg, and another driver as well. A bad start for Romain Grosjean in the Lotus. Unlike many other drivers, he seems to be the unlucky one so far this season in terms of getting caught up in first corner incidents or first lap incidents. And you have to say that it's not his lack of skill. The couple of years he spent away from Formula One has certainly done him good. He's definitely up there in terms of the skill, the young skilled drivers. When the Alonsos go, when the Buttons go, when the Webbers go, it's going to be left up to people like Grosjean, Hamilton, Rosberg, and by then Hamilton will be one of the older guard, but it's going to be up to those drivers to bring the next stage of Formula One drivers in. But as far as yesterday's race goes, Grosjean had a bad one. And a good on-track battle between Paul di Resta and Kimi Raikkonen, the Lotus versus the Force India, on lap 5. And, yet again, we're seeing more and more decent pieces of action on track, thanks to the DRS system. And considering this was the first time we'd seen DRS at Hockenheim, remember Hockenheim and the Nürburgring alternate in years over who hosts the Grand Prix. So next year it will be Nürburgring, 2 years time we're back to Hockenheim. and DRS was only fully implemented last season in 2011. So DRS working pretty well. We were seeing definite passing thanks to the drag reduction system, or the flappy rear wing, whatever you want to call it. But all of this passing led to Sergio Perez, who started 17th on the grid. He was 9th after the first 9 laps, and DRS enabled after 3 laps, and it was as I keep saying, the DRS is giving us passing, and that's what we want as Formula 1 fans. Already, thanks to the updates to the McLarens, Jenson Button was having a much better race. It seems as though these updates are giving Button at least the confidence in the tyres again, and he's not quite back up to his best, but in terms of what Jenson's had these past few races, it's a different car, it's a different driver, so we'll see what goes on there. I've made a note of this as well. The Saubers of Kamui Kobayashi and Sergio Perez quite literally taking the fight to every other team and driver. Sauber have always been this sort of mini independent team, apart from the few years they were associated with the BMW Motor Company, where they were supposed to be driving forward. The Saubers, unfortunately, had to come back, as a mini independent team. They were given the blessing before they re-entered Formula 1 as themselves. They've got the Ferrari engines, and as we know, the Ferrari engines are one of the better engines. It's all in relative terms. These two drivers are young, they're hungry, they want to make passes, they want to get podiums, and sooner or later, when luck is on their side, they will get a race victory. If that's going to be this year, I have no idea. Although, form would suggest that the victory will have to wait until at least next season, considering you've got the Alonsos, you've got the Webbers, you've got the Buttons, you've got the Hamiltons, you've got the Vettels. Those guys can win races. We've had Rosberg win a race this year. We've had Maldonado win a race this year. And, the biggest team not to win a race so far this year is Lotus. Will they win a race? It's looking increasingly like they're not going to get their first victory as Lotus. Obviously, they've won in the past as Renault, obviously with Fernando Alonso and, Fisichella and people like that. But you have to say that the Saubers look to be the best of the rest. You've got your McLarens, you've got your Red Bulls, you've obviously got your Ferraris, and probably your Mercedes you would put at the bottom of those 4. But out of the rest, at present, because the Lotuses are beginning to fall back, you would say that the Saubers, because of their experience in Formula 1, they are beginning to just ever so slightly edge the Lotuses in terms of performance and obviously their driver ability. And in terms of sort of midfield cars, I have to talk about the Force Indias. I've noticed in the last few races at least that the Force Indias are qualifying relatively well, but and qualifying is only half the puzzle. You have to get the race in to complete the race weekend. And the thing is that Force India the entire package is not strong enough. The Mercedes engine is one of the best in the field. Its frontline speed, its straight line speed, what I meant to say, is the best in the field. The Renault engine that Caterham, Red Bull, Williams, Lotus use, their engines are very, very good, They're not the quickest in a straight line. So advantages there go to McLaren. Advantages there go to those 4 teams that I've just mentioned, and in terms of catching people, and in terms of getting away from DRS-enabled cars, because if you remember a few races back, no one could catch the Mercedes, specifically with the DRS was open, because they would get ahead and the DRS would only get them, to a certain level. But the package of Force India, we're talking about the drivers, Hulkenberg and the Resta. We're talking about the aerodynamics of the Force India team. They are not quite good enough for race pace. If you're going to pick a team that does relatively well in qualifying but starts to falter during the race, then the Force Indias would be, my first pick to go in that sort of category. It's heartbreaking for both drivers because, like the Sauber drivers, they're both relatively young. In fact, they are young, there's no doubt about it. They're both hungry. Hulkenberg's had a pole position when he was with Williams in Brazil 2 years ago, or almost 2 years ago now, and you could just see the drivers getting frustrated. Their pit strategies are very, very strange indeed. They'd go for one-stop strategies when it's quite clear that the best strategy to have during a race would be a 2-stopper or even a 3-stopper. And the Force Indies defy logic sometimes. It's very strange indeed. A little bit later into the race, and obviously after it had settled down, Sebastian Vettel was passed by Lewis Hamilton and, unlapped, so to speak, because Lewis Hamilton had to come in, change the flat tyre, which meant he was a lap down very early on. Now, the pace in McLaren's all weekend was relatively good, but in the dry, because qualifying practice leading up to the race was all wet, you could barely move. Alonso got his pole position in the wet, and it was a pretty bad weekend weather-wise until we got to the race. Bright sunshine, relatively warm track temperatures, and it was perfect for the majority of the teams. This gave McLaren the impetus to sort of test out the new parts, because they knew Hamilton probably wasn't going to score many points, if any points at all. So they said, they tuned the engine up to maximum, what they can do back in the pits. They turn the engine up, they turn the wick up, so to speak. And Hamilton managed to pass Vettel and unlap himself from, at the time, the second place driver. And this angered Vettel. You could quite clearly see Vettel was extremely angry at this point. But I remember David Coulthard saying in commentary that if your car is fast enough and you can pull away from the car you're unlapping yourself from, there is nothing to actually stop you from unlapping yourself from a certain individual. Now, the funny thing is, Hamilton unlapped himself from Vettel. He didn't even attempt to unlap himself from Fernando Alonso, who was in the lead. And Vettel was angry and, all sorts of weird things and bits and bobs like that. And, it eventually led to nothing, because Lewis actually came into the pits and retired the car on lap 58. Now, what happens when you get a flat tyre at any stage during Grand Prix, and specifically an early stage when the car's heavy with fuel? And I seem to remember he got the flat tyre relatively early on in the lap as well. It basically meant that he had to go around for 3/4 plus of the lap, that possibly messed up his suspension. The mere fact that Lewis unlapped himself from Vettel is a statement from Hamilton to Vettel, is a statement from McLaren to Red Bull, saying, at present we are faster than you. we are quicker than you, we have a better package than you. Whether this will continue on is another matter, because it's all relative terms. And if you think that was the end of the Red Bull versus McLaren fight, then you would be sorely mistaken. A few laps before the end, I'd say 4 or 5 laps before the end, Jenson Button had come into the pits before Alonso and before Vettel, a couple of laps before. All 3 drivers were in the top 3 positions. It was Alonso, followed by Button, followed by Vettel. Jenson's tyres were beginning to fall off the proverbial cliff that we hear about all the time. The Pirellis are brilliant to a certain operating temperature, and as soon as they go over that operating temperature, or as soon as they reach a certain length of time, they start to lose performance, as we all know. But Vettel made a pass on the outside of Jenson, and you've seen it all in replays and things like that. And he made a pass outside of the limits of the track. Now, the white lines of the track clearly state where the track is, the physical limit of the track. And Vettel, for the majority of the race, was going off those limits, either pushing too hard or, not quite making the corner, maybe locking up before a couple of corners. I don't know. But all of the time, he was, the majority of the time actually, because I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, he was going off track and making positions and, catching up and things like that. But he passed Jenson Button on the outside of the track. Now, you heard the race radio. Jenson got on the radio to his pit wall and said, "Hang on a minute, Vettel passed me on the outside of the track. He passed me off the track." And the FIA actually looked into it. But, the thing popped up at the bottom of the screen. Race incident involving cars 1 and 3, to be looked at. And, we saw that. But meanwhile, while all of this was going on, because it kept us basically glued to the screens, Fernando Alonso pulled away and, he did what he needed to do. He managed to win the race, and that's his 30th Grand Prix victory. And it was a brilliant race from Fernando. It's quite obvious that the Ferrari isn't the fastest car, but the intelligence of the team and, quite frankly, the best driver in Formula 1 at the moment means that he's grabbed his 3rd win of the season. He was the first driver to get 2. Will he be the first driver to get 4 now? He's got 3 wins this year. That's given him a significant lead in the Drivers' Championship. And the thing is, the race wasn't over then. We saw the guys on the podium and, things like that. Button was a bit annoyed that he got passed on the outside. He actually said to Vettel outside of the podium, just as they were putting on the Pirelli hats and getting ready to go up to the podium, he said to Vettel, "Well, you do realise they're going to look at that pass you pulled on me," and look at it, they did. Vettel was penalised 20 seconds after the race, which took him from 2nd place to 5th place. Now that is huge in terms of the Drivers' Championship, and which I'll go through in a minute. So basically that's all the news, all of the talking points done. So I will go over the provisional race results, and then obviously the updated race results after those. So with the win and 25 points for Fernando Alonso, as I say, basically controlled the whole race from start to finish, as he did a couple of weeks back. And he's on form, the Ferrari's on form, and any updates to the Ferrari will give Alonso confidence. I think Alonso is more confident now than he's ever been in his entire career. Yes, okay, he won more races when he was at Renault, but the confidence is there. Alonso has not failed to finish this year. Now, whether that will put a dampener on his season or whatever, as I say, these are the provisional race results. Sebastian Vettel finished second in the race, with Jenson Button third, Kimi Raikkonen fourth, Kobayashi fifth, Sergio Perez, his teammate, is sixth, Michael Schumacher seventh, Mark Webber, who had a pretty disappointing race by all accounts, considering that he had won 2 weeks ago at Silverstone, and it just wasn't coming for him this week. It just, he just could not find the pace that a Vettel or even a Button had. So, pretty disappointing weekend for Mark. Ninth was Nico Hulkenberg in the Force India, and 10th was Nico Rosberg in the second Mercedes. As I said, all teams want to improve, obviously. For instance, Felipe Massa would be doing well to get a really good points finish, but the one team, judging from the top 10 provisional standings, that would be happy with their weekend is Sauber. 100% happy with their weekend. They scored a 5th place finish and a 6th place finish. The updated results aren't a heck of a lot different. First is obviously Alonso, second was Button, third was Kimi Raikkonen, fourth was Kobayashi, fifth was Vettel, and the rest of the positions are actually as they were. As what that's done to the Drivers' Championship, Alonso is first on 154, Mark Webber still second with regards to his iffy race on 120, so a big 34-point lead for Fernando. So no matter what happens in the next Grand Prix, Fernando will be still championship leader. Vettel with only 10 points because of his 5th place finish. He's on 110. Raikkonen on 98, creeping up slowly but surely. Lewis Hamilton with a DNF in his 100th Grand Prix. I mean, not a particular way you want to celebrate 100 Grand Prix with a DNF. Still on 92. Nico Rosberg on 76. Finally, a decent points finish with a 2nd place for Jenson Button with 18. He's up to 68. Romain Grosjean in the Lotus didn't score with a 61. He's on 61, should I say. Sergio Perez in the Sauber on 47, and Kamui Kobayashi moves into 10th place in the Drivers' Championship, and he is on 33. As for the Constructors' standings, Red Bull still top on 230, basically because Ferrari in second only have one consistent point scorer in Fernando Alonso. He got the big 25 for the win, but that only takes him to 177. McLaren, good on one front, bad on another. I bet McLaren wouldn't mind a really, really good race where both drivers finish on the podium, but they're on 160. Lotus on 159. Mercedes on 105. They're in 5th. Sauber 6th with 80. Williams on 47. They didn't score anything this weekend. Force India on 46, and Toro Rosso on 6 points, with the 3 newer teams still yet to score. So basically that's it for this edition of F1 Talk. I know it's been a little bit longer, but I do like to make notes when I'm watching the races these days to make talking points, things like that. It's going to be a busy week for me on this particular channel, as there is another Grand Prix later on this week. Obviously it'll be next Sunday, so we've got 6 days from the you know, from when this video is up to our next Grand Prix, and then after that I will be giving you my half-term report. So a busy week in progress. You're going to get 3 more videos in the next, I would suggest, you know, 10 days or so, plus this one you've just been watching, which I thank you for, and I'll see you next time for more F1 talk.